The moon hung low and swollen over the forest, its silver light spilling like liquid across the frost-kissed leaves. She moved carefully, bare feet brushing against the cold earth, ears alert to every snap of twig, every rustle in the undergrowth. The air smelled of damp pine and something older, something primal that stirred at the edges of her consciousness. Her heart thudded not from fear, but from a memory she couldn't escape. Faces blurred together in shameful recollection, whispers of exclusion, the sting of being unwanted, unseen. She had learned early and painfully that the world had no place for someone like her, someone whose very existence was defined by being out of place. Then came the sound, a howl long and mournful, slicing through the quiet. She froze. It wasn't human, not fully. Something deep within her stirred, a shadowed echo of power she had always buried. Her hands tightened into fists, nails digging into palms. She had tried to belong, tried to be invisible, and yet here, alone under the moon, she felt. Called, the wind carried a whisper, or perhaps it was only her imagination. You belong somewhere. You just haven't found it yet. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as mist curled around her ankles, promising both danger and salvation. And in that moment, she felt the faintest tug of destiny, the first thread of a life she hadn't dared to imagine. She walked the crowded streets of the city with her head down, hood drawn tight over her hair. People brushed past her, some sneering, some simply indifferent. No one met her eyes. She had long ago stopped hoping they would. Her apartment above the bakery smelled faintly of yeast and old books, a place she had claimed for herself but never truly felt at home in. Every evening, she would sit by the window, staring at the horizon where the forest began, imagining what it would be like to belong somewhere. Anywhere, without judgment or whispers following her like shadows. The truth she kept hidden was deeper than anyone could guess. She wasn't just different, she was something more, something primal. Powers she did not fully understand surged beneath her skin, awakening whenever her emotions spiked. But the world, humans, and even other supernatural creatures were not ready for her, so she hid, she pretended to belong nowhere. As she passed a small market, she caught movement from the corner of her eye, a figure watching her, tall, broad, shouldered, an aura that seemed to command the space around him. His gaze locked on hers, sharp and piercing, and for a moment it was as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Something primal stirred in her chest, a dangerous flutter she wasn't sure she wanted to name. But just as quickly as he appeared, he turned away, disappearing into the crowd, and she was left, as always, alone in the midst of the bustling city, feeling the ache of solitude settle like a familiar cloak over her shoulders. She tried to shake off the encounter, telling herself it meant nothing. But all day, his image lingered in the back of her mind, the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, the weight of authority that seemed to radiate from him effortlessly. Later that evening, at the edge of the forest where she often wandered to find solace, he was there. Not by chance, she realized as his eyes swept over her, calculating, unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, rumbling like distant thunder. Her pulse quickened. "Neither should you," she replied, more boldly than she felt. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a dangerous curve that promised both amusement and peril. "Perhaps," he said, stepping closer, "but unlike you, I don't have to hide." Her hands trembled. She had faced humans who judged her, strangers who sneered, even rivals who tried to push her down. But there was something in him, a power she felt to her very core, that made her heart betray her with every beat. And even as fear whispered caution, curiosity and a longing she didn't understand bloomed in its place. As the shadows of the trees stretched around them, she felt the first real spark of a connection that would change everything, a dangerous, forbidden thread weaving their fates together, even before they knew it. Her chest still burned from the Alpha's intense gaze, and every nerve in her body felt alive with tension. The memory of his presence lingered like smoke, both tantalizing and terrifying. She had thought, foolishly, she admitted to herself, that she might approach him without consequence, that perhaps he would see her as more than a shadow, a nobody. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, and she walked toward the clearing near the edge of the forest where she often wandered. She had rehearsed what she might say, how she might step forward without seeming weak or desperate. "Excuse me," she called softly as she caught sight of him again, standing at the boundary of the trees. His silhouette was powerful, commanding, and yet impossibly beautiful in the silver light of the moon. He turned, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't follow me." Her stomach twisted. "I'm not following, I just—" She hesitated, her voice faltering under the weight of his scrutiny. "I wanted to speak to you." He stepped closer, the shadows of the forest framing him like a predator in its domain. "And why would I want to speak to you?" His tone was clipped, detached, but beneath it was something sharper, a barrier she could not cross. Her heart sank. She had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed it with trembling lips and hopeful eyes, and now the coldness in his words crashed over her like a winter storm. Her hands clenched at her sides, knuckles white, and she felt the sting of tears she refused to shed in front of him. I thought maybe," she swallowed hard, "maybe you'd see me as someone worth noticing." He paused, and for a fraction of a second his expression softened, but then the mask returned. "You misunderstand," he said, his voice even but cutting. "I notice many things, but not everything deserves attention. Not everyone deserves my time." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Her vision blurred as heat rose to her cheeks, and she turned away, forcing herself to keep walking through the forest. Each step felt heavier than the last, every twig beneath her feet echoing her humiliation. Alone at last, she sank to the ground, back against the rough bark of an ancient oak. Her chest ached, not just from rejection, but from the unrelenting loneliness she had carried her whole life. Tears threatened to spill, but she pressed them back, biting her lip until the sharp sting reminded her she was still alive, still fighting. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of a howl. It was a reminder, subtle and insistent, that she was not entirely powerless, that somewhere inside her a force stirred, waiting, and though her heart ached with the sting of rejection, a quiet ember of determination ignited. She would not be invisible. She would not be dismissed forever. Somewhere, deep in the forest, something watched, something patient, something that might one day recognize the strength she had hidden even from herself. And even in her darkest moment, she felt a tiny, fragile thread of hope, one that would pull her toward the path she had been running from her whole life. Her apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the radiator and the occasional whisper of wind brushing against the window pane. She sat cross-legged on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the faint moonlight that spilled across the worn wooden boards. The forest shadows clung to her memories, reminding her of the alpha's cold dismissal, of the sting that had settled deep in her chest. Yet even in that solitude, she could not shake the feeling that she was being watched, not by human eyes, but by something older, something attuned to her very essence. Her hands trembled, a subtle heat radiating from her fingertips, and she realized with a sudden, startling clarity that her power was awake tonight. It began as a low pulse in her chest, rhythmic and insistent, syncing with her heartbeat. The hairs on her arms stood on end, and she instinctively curled her fingers, as though the air itself would respond. A subtle glow shimmered under her skin, visible only to her in the moonlight. She drew in a sharp breath, trying to steady the rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "I've been hiding for too long," she whispered to herself, voice trembling, "pretending I'm nothing when I'm this." A gust of wind rattled the window, and she flinched. Shadows shifted in unnatural ways, stretching and curling around the edges of the room, responding to her presence. She could hear the forest beyond calling to her, the faintest brush of movement, the echo of distant howls. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with exhilaration. Her reflection in the glass flickered, and for a heartbeat, she saw herself not as a girl hiding in a city apartment, but as a creature of strength, power, and possibility. The truth she had buried beneath years of caution and shame surged forward. She was no longer just human. She was something more, something formidable, and yet, with revelation came fear. If the Alpha had only seen a fragment of her power, would he recoil? Would he still see her as an outsider, someone unworthy of his time, his attention, his protection? The thought made her chest tighten, but it also fueled a spark of defiance. She would not shrink away, not again. A soft thump against the wall startled her, and she whipped around, eyes wide. Nothing was there. Just the shadows, curling and twisting as though they had a life of their own. She placed her hands on the floor, willing the pulse within her to calm. But a part of her whispered that this was only the beginning. Her secret could no longer stay buried, and the world, especially the Alpha, would soon have to reckon with who she truly was. And somewhere deep in the night, beyond the forest and the city, a faint howl answered hers, promising that her awakening would not go unnoticed. The night hung heavy with mist as she patrolled the edge of the forest, senses alert to every rustle, every shifting shadow. Her heartbeat had barely settled from the surge of power she had felt alone in her apartment, yet an unfamiliar tension coiled in her chest, the kind that thrummed not from fear, but from something else entirely. Something dangerous, something that made her pulse quicken in ways she couldn't control. She hadn't expected him to be here, but of course he was. The Alpha emerged from the darkness like a predator unconsciously drawing attention to itself. His movements were precise, deliberate, and every step carried a weight she could feel pressing against her skin. His eyes locked on hers, sharp, unreadable, yet filled with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "You shouldn't wander here alone," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying over the whispering leaves. She bristled, trying to steady her voice. "I don't need your protection." A slow smirk curved his lips, the kind that suggested amusement, challenge, and something else she couldn't name. "I'm not offering protection," he replied. "I'm offering observation. I've been watching you for longer than you realize." Her throat went dry. She wanted to deny the flutter in her chest, the undeniable pull she felt toward him, but words caught in her throat. He took a step closer, closing the distance, and she felt the warmth radiating from him, the authority in every inch of his presence. Her body betrayed her with a tremor she tried to hide. "You're different," he said, his gaze boring into hers. "More than you let anyone see, stronger than you think." Her pulse raced. She knew he could sense it, that he could feel the power humming beneath her skin, waiting to break free, and yet the same caution that had kept her hidden for years surged back. "You don't know me," she said, voice firmer than she felt. "You don't know what I am." He tilted his head, studying her as though deciding whether to respect her boundaries or challenge them. "I don't need to know everything," he murmured, voice low, almost a growl. "But I know enough to see that you don't belong where you are. And I also know you're trying very hard not to belong anywhere." The words hit deeper than he could imagine. He wasn't just seeing her, he was looking past every mask she had carefully worn for years. Desire, frustration, and fear tangled in her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wanted to step back, to retreat, to run as she had so many times before, but the pull toward him was magnetic, irresistible. I can't," she stammered, the distance between them feeling smaller with every heartbeat. He leaned just slightly closer, the scent of him, earth, wood, power, filling her senses. "You already are," he whispered, and then, almost imperceptibly, he turned, disappearing into the darkness. Her legs trembled as she sank to the ground, chest heaving, forbidden, dangerous, magnetic. Every emotion collided inside her, leaving her dizzy, overwhelmed, and aching. And she knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that she could never fully ignore him again. Somewhere beyond the trees, the faintest echo of a howl answered the tension between them, as if the forest itself recognized the connection already binding them, one neither of them could deny, no matter how fiercely they tried. The city had a rhythm of its own at night, but beneath the hum of distant traffic and the flickering lamplight, something else moved, something old and dangerous. She felt it in her bones as she navigated the narrow alleyways near the forest's edge. every shadow seeming to watch her, every whisper of wind carrying secrets she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Rumors had begun to ripple through the supernatural world, stories of a wolf unlike any other, a creature of strength and mystery that moved unseen, untamed. Some called it a harbinger of danger, others a protector of the weak. She knew deep in her chest that the whispers were about her, though no one could have guessed the truth, that the power stirring within her was not fully hers to command yet, but it had awakened hungry and alert. She paused at the edge of the forest, chest rising and falling, senses on fire. The Alpha's presence lingered in her mind like a pulse, sharp and insistent. He would sense her shift if he came close enough, and she wasn't sure whether that thought thrilled or terrified her. A soft rustle behind her made her spin, teeth bared instinctively, though the figure that emerged from the darkness was human enough, at least at first glance, one of the pack scouts, eyes wide with caution. "There are whispers," he said, voice low, almost reverent, about a wolf in the city. "Powerful, they say it doesn't belong to anyone." Her stomach tightened. She wanted to deny it, to stay hidden, but the power thrumming beneath her skin wouldn't let her. It's just a story," she murmured, voice barely audible, though even to her own ears it sounded unconvincing. The scout's gaze flicked to the forest, then back to her. "Stories have teeth," he warned. "And teeth find prey." Alone again, she sank to her knees, hands brushing the cold dirt. The forest whispered in response, as though acknowledging her, bending subtly to her presence. Power rippled beneath her skin, tingling with every heartbeat. Fear warred with exhilaration, but beneath it all lay the undeniable truth. She could no longer hide. The longer she stayed silent, the more danger she invited, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. And somewhere in the distance, a howl cut through the night, long and low, answering hers. She shivered not from cold, but from the awareness that the Alpha and the rest of the supernatural world would soon feel the pull of what she truly was. The shadows shifted around her, alive, patient, and insistent, a reminder that her awakening had only just begun. The night air was thick with tension, carrying the metallic tang of rain, soaked earth, and the faint whisper of leaves stirred by unseen movement. She sensed it before she saw it, another presence sharp and predatory circling the forest edge. Every instinct screamed caution, but curiosity, reckless and stubborn, pulled her forward. "You shouldn't be here," a low voice growled from the shadows. She froze, another shifter, taller, broader, with eyes that glimmered with challenge and something darker. Malice, perhaps, or jealousy. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady, though her pulse raced. The figure stepped into the dim light, a smirk twisting his features. "I could ask the same of you, a lone wolf wandering where she doesn't belong. Interesting." His words dripped with mockery, yet there was a sharp edge that made her muscles coil, ready to strike. Before she could respond, the Alpha emerged from the trees, silent and imposing. His presence hit her like a physical force, and even the rival seemed to hesitate under the weight of his gaze. "Back off," he said, voice low and dangerous, every word laced with authority. The rival chuckled darkly. "Or what? You'll bite me." He circled, testing, provoking, and she felt the tension tighten around her chest. Something in her stirred, raw, untrained, pulsing with power she hadn't yet fully mastered. The Alpha's eyes locked on hers, sharp and commanding, and a flicker of understanding passed between them. Control it, not yet, but soon. His protective stance was clear, his presence both shield and challenge, and for a moment she felt warmth in the cold night, a tether she couldn't deny. The rival lunged suddenly, teeth bared, claws flashing in the moonlight. She dodged instinctively, feeling the surge of her own strength, hair bristling and muscles coiling. The forest seemed to respond, shadows bending subtly, as if aiding her movement. The Alpha intercepted, a growl rumbling from his chest, teeth flashing, forcing the rival to stagger back. "You can't hide here," he said sharply to her, protective but measured, "not anymore. If you're going to survive, you'll have to face what you are, and accept that you're not alone." Her heart pounded, not just from the fight, but from the closeness of him, the heat, the intensity, the undeniable pull between them. She had tried to resist, tried to remain invisible, but moments like this reminded her that her path was no longer hers alone. The world had begun to notice her, for better or worse. The rival hissed and retreated into the shadows, leaving only the distant echo of his threat. The Alpha stepped closer, hand brushing against hers. A fleeting, electrifying touch. "You're stronger than you realize," he murmured, voice roughened by exertion, his eyes holding a depth of emotion she couldn't name. "And this power. It's dangerous, yes, but also yours. You must own it." Her breath caught. She nodded, swallowing hard, knowing he was right. Her world had changed irrevocably, and the pull between them was no longer just tension. It was magnetic, unstoppable, and utterly forbidden. Somewhere deep in the forest, a howl rose in answer, carrying both challenge and promise. She would survive, she would fight, and somehow, she would find a place at his side. The pack house was alive with tension, the air thick with murmurs and wary glances. She stood near the edge of the great hall, feeling every pair of eyes like a weight pressing against her skin. The Alpha had brought her here into the heart of his world, and already the divide was clear. Some were curious, others openly skeptical, and a few wore thinly veiled hostility. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shrink into the shadows. She had survived rejection before, but this, being thrust into the Alpha's domain under the scrutiny of those who would never fully accept her, was a new kind of vulnerability. Every whispered word felt like a threat, every glance a test she wasn't sure she could pass. The Alpha entered behind her, silent as ever, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath. "This is where you belong," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly, authoritative yet calm. "Among my pack." Murmurs rose, some sharp, some incredulous. His, outsider, one growled, voice laced with disbelief. Another shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between them. "Are you certain this is wise, Alpha?" Her heart hammered, a mix of fear and defiance rising in tandem. She had imagined rejection from him, but now the scrutiny of the entire pack magnified the sting. And yet, beneath the tension, she felt something else, a tether to him, undeniable and fierce, pulling her toward courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Wise or not," the Alpha continued, gaze sweeping the room with lethal precision, "she is here because she has earned it, and because I will not be questioned about my decisions." His eyes softened as they met hers for a fleeting second, and she felt a warmth that both reassured and terrified her. Even so, the whispers persisted, doubts like thorns pressing into her mind. She could feel them weighing her down, threatening to erode the fragile confidence she had begun to muster. But the presence of the Alpha, steady and unwavering beside her, reminded her that she was no longer invisible. She was no longer alone. Attention, filled silence settled, broken only by the soft shuffle of feet and the distant howl of the forest beyond the pack house. Somewhere in the shadows, rival eyes watched, waiting for weakness. And she knew, with a clarity that made her stomach tighten, that her place here would not come easily. She would have to fight, not with claws, but with heart, strength, and the courage to claim the life she had been denied for so long. As the Alpha's gaze returned to the skeptics, a subtle promise lingered in the air. The world had taken notice of her, and it would be forced to reckon with what she had become. And though fear whispered doubts, excitement surged stronger. This was her chance to belong, to be seen, to rise. Rain lashed against the trees like 1,000 invisible fists, turning the forest floor into a slick, treacherous battlefield. She crouched low, muscles coiled, senses stretched taut, the pulse of her power humming beneath her skin. Somewhere in the storm, chaos roared, the distant screams of civilians caught in the crossfire, the clash of claws and teeth echoing through the darkened woods. The Alpha appeared at her side as if conjured by instinct, wet hair plastered to his forehead, eyes blazing with intensity. "Stay close," he ordered, voice cutting through the thunder. "We move together or we don't move at all." Her heart hammered in her chest not from fear, but from the exhilaration of standing beside him, shoulder to shoulder, facing the danger she had never imagined she could survive. "I'm not," she began, but he silenced her with a look, commanding, protective, magnetic. Creatures of shadow surged from the underbrush, snarling and snapping, eyes gleaming with malevolence. She felt her own strength rise in response, muscles coiling, claws extending, teeth bared. Power she had only glimpsed alone in the apartment now roared within her, and she struck, swift and precise, sending one of the attackers sprawling. The Alpha moved in perfect sync, a force of lethal grace beside her, each strike purposeful, protective. For the first time, she realized that she didn't need to hide her power. She could wield it, could trust herself, could trust him. And yet, every brush of his arm, every shared glance in the chaos, sent sparks racing along her nerves, igniting a fire she barely controlled. "Watch your flank," he barked, dragging her back just as another shadow lunged. Her breath caught as he pressed close, heartbeats nearly colliding, and she realized, terrifyingly, thrillingly, that she was tethered to him in ways that went beyond instinct, beyond survival. Hours, or was it minutes, passed in a blur of movement and sound. Rain soaked them, mud caked their limbs, but the storm was not just around them. It was inside them, pulsing with adrenaline, desire, and unspoken tension. When the last attacker fell, silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. The Alpha's hand brushed hers as they stood, fingers grazing, deliberate and fleeting, and her chest fluttered with something tender and terrifying. "You fought well," he murmured, voice low, almost intimate, "stronger than I expected." Her pulse thundered, "I had help," she whispered, but neither of them denied the truth. The storm had changed everything. The Alpha had seen her power, her courage, and perhaps even her heart. And in the quiet aftermath, as lightning split the sky and rain-slicked leaves glistened like silver, she realized that the forbidden attraction between them had deepened, no longer a whisper, but a roaring current neither could ignore. The pack house was silent, save for the soft crackle of the hearth fire and the distant rumble of the forest beyond. She stood near the center of the great hall, shoulders stiff, heart hammering as dozens of eyes, some curious, some skeptical, fixed on her. Every muscle in her body screamed with anticipation and dread. She had faced danger alongside the Alpha, survived the storm, proven her strength. But now came the true test, acceptance. The Alpha stepped forward, Rain still clinging to his hair and clothes, his presence commanding the room. The air shifted as his gaze swept across the pack, every movement deliberate, authoritative. Then he stopped, focusing on her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "This is hers," he said, voice low but carrying across the hall, each word deliberate and unyielding. "She belongs with us. She is part of this pack." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some incredulous, some skeptical. "Alpha, are you certain?" A senior pack member challenged, tone edged with doubt. "She's not one of us." He turned, eyes flashing with quiet fury. "I am certain," he replied sharply. "She has proven her strength, her loyalty, and her courage, and more than that. She is mine. Do not question my judgment." Her heart skipped a beat, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and something tender blooming within her chest. She had never imagined anyone would claim her so boldly, so publicly. The weight of the Alpha's words settled over her like a protective mantle, fierce and undeniable. Some pack members exchanged uneasy glances, but the force of his authority left little room for dissent. She felt a surge of pride and relief. Finally, someone saw her for what she was, accepted her power, and claimed her in a way that left no doubt. The Alpha stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Do you understand what this means?" he murmured, voice roughened by emotion, almost a growl. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. I think so." He inclined his head, eyes softening, but the underlying intensity never waned. "Then stay close," he said, hand brushing briefly against hers, a spark that left her knees weak. "You are part of this pack now, and I will protect you, always." The firelight danced across his features, shadows and warmth mingling, and she realized that acceptance was not just about surviving, not just about power. It was about belonging, about being seen and being wanted. A low, approving growl echoed from the corner of the hall, the Alpha's subtle affirmation that she had finally found her place, and for the first time in her life she allowed herself to hope that she might truly belong, not just in the pack, but in the heart of the one who had claimed her. The night air was thick with tension, a charged energy that hummed in her veins as she and the alpha faced the rival pack. Shadows twisted between the trees, carrying movement that made her pulse quicken. The challengers were more than opportunists. They were skilled, dangerous, and determined to test the alpha's claim. "Stay close," he murmured, eyes scanning the perimeter. She nodded, heart hammering, muscles coiled and ready. She had trained herself for moments like this, but nothing had prepared her for the thrill of standing shoulder to shoulder with him in a fight that mattered, not just to the pack, but to her own sense of belonging. The first attack came swift and sharp. Claws flashed in the moonlight, teeth gleaming, and instinct took over. She leapt, pivoting on the wet forest floor, striking with precision she hadn't known she possessed. Shadows bent and twisted as her power surged, granting her reflexes faster, stronger, deadlier than before. The alpha moved like a storm beside her, his growls and snarls a rhythm that she matched unconsciously. They moved as one, silent communication passing between them. A glance, a subtle shift, a tilt of his body, and she struck where he anticipated, covering him when his guard was down. Their bond, forged in tension and desire, guided each movement. A rival lunged at her from the shadows, but she sidestepped, claws digging into the ground for leverage, and drove him back. He hissed, surprised, but the fire in her eyes warned him. She was no longer prey. She was a force, good, the alpha barked, voice cutting through the night. Keep moving, keep striking, protect each other. For minutes that felt like hours they fought. Rain slicked the earth, mud clung to their limbs, and the scent of blood and ozone filled the air. But every attack she repelled, every rival she drove back, filled her with a fierce, intoxicating confidence. She was no longer invisible. She was a shifter, a warrior, and she was his. When the last opponent fell back into the shadows, retreating with low growls of frustration and fear, she dropped to her knees, chest heaving. The alpha stepped beside her, hand brushing against hers in a fleeting touch that sent shivers racing through her. "You did well," he said, voice low, almost intimate, stronger than I imagined. She met his gaze, feeling the heat of their connection. Pride, exhilaration, desire, and the magnetic pull that neither could deny. "We did well," she corrected, voice shaky but determined. He nodded, a slow, approving smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Together, he murmured almost to himself, and she felt it too, the undeniable truth that side by side they were unstoppable. The forest fell silent again, save for the distant echo of the retreating rivals and the soft hum of the night. In that moment, amidst the adrenaline and the rain, she realized that she had found not just her strength, but a place where she belonged, and a bond that was unbreakable. The fire crackled softly in the alpha's private chamber, casting dancing shadows across the walls. She sat across from him, hands trembling slightly, heart heavy with the weight of what she had kept buried for years. The battle had left them both exhausted, yet adrenaline still pulsed through her veins, mingling with the nervous energy of confession. "I need to tell you something," she began, voice barely above a whisper. The alpha's gaze fixed on her, intense, patient, demanding honesty. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the firelight glinting off his eyes. "I've sensed it for a while," he said quietly. "But hearing it, I want the truth, all of it." Her chest tightened. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, yet now, words caught in her throat. I'm not who you think I am," she admitted, swallowing hard. "There's more to me than I've shown, my lineage, my family," she hesitated, eyes downcast. "I wasn't just abandoned, my past. It's complicated, dangerous." The alpha's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing, waiting. His presence was steady, unwavering, and it gave her the courage to continue. "I'm a descendant of a line of shifters," she confessed. "Not just ordinary wolves, my ancestors. They held power that many fear. I didn't know if I could control it, so I hid, pretending to be nothing, pretending to belong nowhere." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating, but she dared to lift her eyes. The alpha's expression was unreadable, part astonishment, part caution, part something else she couldn't name. "You mean the rumors," he murmured slowly. "The whispers I've heard." She nodded, swallowing again. "Yes, that's me. I never wanted it to reach you, or anyone else." A long pause stretched between them. Then, slowly, he reached out, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. "This changes nothing," he said quietly, voice edged with emotion. "It doesn't make you less. It makes you more, stronger, and yes, it's dangerous. But so are you, and I trust you." Her chest heaved, a mixture of relief and shock flooding through her. The weight she had carried for so long, fear of rejection, of being exposed, of losing him, began to lift, replaced by something tender and powerful. You're not afraid?" she asked, voice trembling. He shook his head, eyes locking with hers. "Afraid, no. I see who you are and I accept it, all of it. I accept you." Tears blurred her vision, but this time they were not shameful. They were cathartic, cleansing. In the flickering firelight, amidst the shadows and the quiet, she realized that the bond they shared could withstand truth, fear, and danger alike. She had been terrified of losing him, but now she understood. Trust, courage, and love were stronger than secrets. And as their fingers brushed, tentative yet electric, a faint sound drifted through the room. A whisper of destiny, of power, of a bond that had endured storms, trials, and hidden truths. They were not just alpha and outsider, they were partners bound by more than fate, by the strength of trust and the undeniable pull of their hearts. The night was silent, but inside her chest a storm raged. Even after revealing the truth about her lineage, she couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her. Fear that she had pushed him away, fear that her secrets might have changed everything. She sat on the edge of the bed in the alpha's quarters, hands clasped tightly, staring at the floor as if the wood could offer answers. He entered quietly, his presence filling the room without a word. She felt the tension in her shoulders, the unshed tears, and the tiny tremble of uncertainty. "I should have left," she whispered, voice breaking. "After everything. Maybe you'd be better off without me." He knelt beside her, eyes soft yet unwavering. "Do you really believe that?" His hand reached for hers, brushing the tips of her fingers with deliberate gentleness. "After all you've done, after everything we've faced together." Her lips quivered and she shook her head. I'm afraid that all of this, what we have, could fall apart because of who I am." He took both her hands in his, holding them firmly yet tenderly. "Listen to me," he said, voice low, raw with emotion. "You are stronger than fear. You are mine, and no secret, no danger, no past can change that. We survive together, or not at all." Her breath caught, relief mingling with lingering doubt. The storm inside her chest began to ease, replaced by a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel fully before. "You really mean that?" His thumb brushed over her knuckles, steadying, grounding her. "Every word. You're not alone anymore. You never will be." She leaned into him, the tension in her body slowly melting. Tears fell freely now, but they were not tears of shame. They were of release, of reconciliation, of trust restored. He wrapped his arms around her, firm and protective, and she let herself melt into the embrace, finally allowing herself to feel safe, loved, and seen. For the first time, she understood the depth of their bond, not just the pull of destiny, not just the forbidden attraction, but a connection forged through trials, trust, and unspoken devotion. They had faced storms, battles, and secrets, and yet here they were, stronger together. The firelight flickered across their intertwined forms, shadows dancing around them, echoing the rhythm of their hearts. The alpha pressed a gentle kiss to her temple, a silent promise that no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. And in that quiet, intimate moment, she realized she had finally begun to mend, not just the wounds of her past, but the ones she carried in her heart, now soothed by trust, love, and the unwavering strength of his presence. The full moon hung low over the forest, casting silver light across the glistening leaves and mist-laden paths. She stood at the edge of the clearing, chest rising and falling with anticipation, every nerve alive with the hum of power coursing through her veins. Tonight, there were no secrets to hide, no fear of rejection, only the raw, unfiltered truth of who she was. The Alpha stepped beside her, a quiet presence, his gaze fixed on the moonlit forest. The air between them crackled with tension and desire, the unspoken bond that had grown stronger with every trial now impossible to ignore. "It's beautiful," he murmured, eyes reflecting the silver glow, though she knew he was speaking as much to her as to the night. Her heartbeat quickened. I'm ready," she whispered, voice trembling with both fear and exhilaration. "To embrace it, to embrace myself." He reached for her, fingers brushing hers, and a jolt of energy surged through her. The connection between them, emotional, magnetic, and primal, pulled her closer until distance was meaningless. "Then show me," he murmured, voice low and compelling, a growl threading through it. "Show me who you truly are." She closed her eyes, letting the moonlight bathe her, letting the power she had long hidden rise without restraint. Muscles coiled, senses sharpened, and she felt the forest itself respond to her presence. The shadows bending, the wind carrying whispers of acknowledgement, the earth thrumming beneath her feet. She was no longer just a girl pretending to belong nowhere. She was a shifter, a force, a destiny in motion. The Alpha stepped closer, guiding, steadying, yet giving her freedom to move. Their breaths mingled, hearts beating in sync as her transformation reached its full expression. Energy coursed between them, unspoken words and longing manifesting as an intimate, electric tether. She felt seen, wanted, powerful, and utterly, irrevocably connected to him. Together, he murmured, voice a husky promise, hand resting on her waist as the silver light shimmered over them. "Always together." She smiled, trembling with emotion, and leaned into him. The world, the pack, the rivals, the past, slipped away, leaving only this moment of unity, of acceptance, of love unbound. The power she had feared, the legacy she had hidden, and the heart she had protected so fiercely, all converged under the moonlight. As the night embraced them, their lips met, a gentle collision of longing and destiny sealing their bond. Every fear, every shadow, every whispered doubt faded into the forest's silver glow. In that instant, under the watchful gaze of the moon, she embraced not just her powers, but her future, with him, with the pack, with a heart finally unafraid to belong. The howl of a distant wolf echoed through the night, answering theirs, a chorus of acceptance and destiny, and she knew with unshakable certainty that she had finally come home. Dawn broke over the pack territory, golden light spilling across the forest and reflecting off dew-kissed leaves. She stood at the edge of the clearing, the remnants of last night's moonlight still fading in the shadows, and felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. The Alpha was at her side, calm and steady, his hand brushing hers in a silent affirmation. The pack gathered around, expressions a mix of curiosity, respect, and cautious acceptance. No longer whispers of doubt, no skeptical glances, only acknowledgement of her strength, her courage, and the bond she shared with the Alpha. Their leader's nod carried authority, signaling to the others that she was not an outsider. She was part of them now. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh morning air fill her lungs. Every step she had taken, the rejection, the hiding, the battles, the secrets revealed, had led to this moment. And as she looked at the pack, she realized she was no longer pretending to belong nowhere. She had a family, a home, a place where she was seen and valued. The Alpha's gaze met hers, a subtle smile tugging at his lips. "Welcome home," he said softly, hand tightening around hers. The simplicity of his words belied the power behind them, the weight of the promise, the protection, and the love that had been unwavering through every storm. The pack stirred, some approaching to offer tentative gestures of acceptance, others bowing heads in respect. She returned their acknowledgement with a quiet confidence, finally standing fully in her truth, in her strength, in the love that had guided her here. A howl rose from the forest, echoed by dozens more in response. A chorus that celebrated unity, power, and acceptance. She smiled, feeling the vibrations resonate deep in her chest, a tangible connection to the pack, to the land, and to the Alpha who had claimed her heart. She glanced at him, eyes bright, a mixture of awe and tenderness. "I never thought I could feel this," she whispered. "You were always meant to." He replied, his voice steady and sure, "You just needed to see it for yourself." Together, they stepped forward into the clearing, side by side, not just as alpha and mate, but as equals, partners, and heart-bound companions. The forest seemed to welcome them, the sun casting long shadows that intertwined like the threads of their destinies. For the first time in her life, she truly belonged, not to a place, not to a secret, but to a pack that accepted her, and to a heart that had seen all her truths and loved her anyway. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and leaves of home, and of a love that had survived every trial. And as the pack closed around her, she understood at last. This was her life, her family, her destiny. She had found her place, and she would never let it go.